My name is Emily Pasi with the American Planning Association, and we are live in Seattle, Washington at the 2015 National Planning Conference. I'm here today with Bill Cesanek. Bill is the Vice President of CDM Smith, and he's also the APA co-chair of the Water Task Force. Bill, thank you so much for being here today with us.
Thank you.
So we're going to be talking about the Water Task Force and how it got started. And I know last year, actually, at the National Planning Conference, that was the creation point of this entire task force. So why don't you tell us the theory behind the creation and what you've been up to this past year?
Sure, I'd be happy to share that. At the conference last year, the president, Bill Anderson, really set forth a number of initiatives that revolved around the planning goals for the Planning Association. And at that time, one of the major themes was water. He created a number of task forces, which was really unheard of within APA, and he charged them all with coming up with a series of recommendations for improved practice for planners in general. So one of the task forces he charged was the Water Task Force. And in some way, my name was recommended as somebody who might be available to assist. So the actual genesis of and his selection of the issues is not entirely clear to me. But it's clear that water is a premier issue to planners and to the community and society at large. So we moved forward. They formed a task force consisting of some prominent names in water and water management, folks from HUD, from Rebuilt by Design Initiative, some fairly prominent landscape architects, and a whole series of practicing planners throughout the country. And we met and began the process of trying to determine what the scope and scale of the project would be. When it comes to water management, it's really hard to begin to define what the boundaries of the problem might be in terms of what the role of planners is and how large you want the examination of issues to be. Mm-hmm. Water is an issue that affects geographic scales from international to national to local. It's an issue that has a great amount of science surrounding it in terms of hydrologists and geologists and other water professionals. It's a discipline and a study that engineers take great interest in terms of civil and environmental engineering. And it's one that planners relate to in terms of the built environment and land development and accommodating the water needs of population growth. So given this wide range of potential options in looking at the task force goals, we narrowed it down essentially to say, let's look at this from a national perspective. We'll venture into an international waters a little bit. We don't want to look at sub-areas of the country quite yet. We'll save that for a future phase. And let's try to define sort of the core issues from the drivers that really begin to define why water is becoming a crisis in many locations and why it's an issue that deserves the attention of planners.
So looking more broadly at the recommendations themselves, can you describe the overarching themes of those recommendations if you had to break them down into different subgroups?
Sure.
I know there's more than 30, so there's quite
right.
a few.
My goal would be not to bore you with all 30. And actually 30 is probably the short list of what we originally developed. But we started defining 6 core themes. And if you don't mind, I'm going to refer to some notes on this.
Absolutely.
But the 6 core themes are essentially what we saw as the core issues that drove the examination of water issues and how it relates to planning, practice, and policy. So the first core theme was that water is an essential organizing element in a healthy urban environment. So this is our sort of fundamental concept that you need to establish the value of water before you talk about how to better manage it or how to improve planning practice. So it became clear to all the task force members and everybody that we spoke to in interviews related to this research that water was perhaps underrepresented in urban environments and needed to achieve a more dominant role in terms of planning and engineering and science. The second core theme is that planning practice needs to take an integrated, systems-oriented approach to water management. And in this, we really wanted to better integrate water planning into comprehensive planning, sort of the comprehensive master planning that planners do for communities. Water affects so many dimensions of life in terms of supply and sanitation and natural environment, that we really needed to take a holistic approach to that. So that was the second one. The third theme was that new mechanisms for interdisciplinary interaction are needed for effective water management. So here we get back to the discussion of interdisciplinary, and we reached out to engineers, scientists, hydrologists, geologists, architects, landscape architects, economists, policy experts, and began to talk about how do they intersect with themes of water? How do their jobs relate to water management? And what we found was that all of them have key roles in defining water management issues and trying to better integrate planning into a more sustainable function, a more sustainable environment. And really the goal here is to begin to align the planning strategies with other peer professional organizations. So we know the landscape architects are very involved in water. We know peer organizations such as Water Environment Research Foundation, American Water Works Association, American Society of Landscape Architects, American Institute of Architects, all are involved in water in some way. And we really need to think about ways to intersect more effectively and to share our agendas and our ideas about better water management. And through that synergy, there's a great belief that a much more effective approach can be developed to water management. So that was a long one, I'm sorry, but that was the third. The fourth is that planners need to apply new, improved, and innovative professional practices to manage water more sustainably and provide greater social equity. So in this theme, we're essentially trying to create, water protective planning processes. The natural environment we see in California, water has been overdeveloped, it's been oversubscribed. There's subsidence in Texas. There's water quality shortages that occur throughout the country. These are being defined by the U.S. Geological Survey in many ways. And we also need to find ways to connect health metrics to essentially the water environment and understand how water environment in terms of green infrastructure, for example, can improve heat island impacts, and that directly affects health of urban dwellers. The keynote speaker today spoke a lot about distressed communities and the importance of health issues, and the water environment really offers a huge opportunity for professional planners to begin to improve distressed communities and communities in need. So that was our fourth theme. The fifth theme is that innovative land use planning and urban designs are needed to expand and improve the water environment. And really what we're trying to do here is create example water-emphasizing urban designs that feature water, that create water in terms of the natural context. In most cities, most of the streams were covered over and piped and buried as part of the development. Originally, it was because people thought that the streams carried disease, and actually a lot of them did carry raw sewage originally. Later on, it was determined that maybe that land was more economically valuable. And so many of the stream networks in the cities have been piped and contained and removed from the urban environment. So there's really an effort now to begin to think about, through urban design, how to reintegrate water features, even in a representative fashion, into the urban environment. And the last theme relates to adaptive land use, environmental, and infrastructure planning, and in the way that it can help to increase community resilience and climate change. And essentially provide more resistance to extreme climate change events. So there's been a lot of work done through Rebuild by Design initiatives from HUD and other initiatives to look at how the natural environment can really begin to attenuate the effects of storm surges and floods and high winds. And there's also a lot of attention about better land use practices and avoiding floodplain erosion and other management approaches based on land use practices can really help to shelter the society from increasing effects of climate change. So those are the 6 themes in short, and you're probably happy I didn't go into the 33 practices.
Well, of all the things that you were mentioning, it's really exciting because I can see in different areas of APA, our members are already doing those things on an individual level, which is very exciting. Some of them are getting recognized with National Planning Awards tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Some of them, as far as coalitions go, I know it was Water Week last week, which was really exciting. And so APA was able to partner with the Water Environment Foundation, WEF, and ASLA, American Society of Landscape Architects. So it's really exciting. Those beginnings are there, and there's things in place, but that leads me into my next question. So what does the board do next, and what does our APA leadership do next to kind of make sure that these things go just beyond the individual acts, that our entire association is working toward those goals?
Yeah, you make a good point there, and I think it's important to emphasize that the planning community at large has been heavily engaged in individual water practices and water management improvement approaches for many years. What we're seeing now is that the problem is worsening, for example, the drought in California. Mm-hmm. And we're also seeing that there's an interest in our sort of sister organizations, our peer organizations, of working more closely together. So I had the opportunity on Saturday to deliver the task force report to the APA Board of Directors. And I was a little uncertain about what their reception might be. Water tends to be, like I said before, it's rooted in science and engineering, and many other fields lay claim to water management. But planners really seem to be the connective tissue, if you will, among many of those groups, and especially insofar as they relate to many of the factors that drive water problems, like land development and development of sensitive environments, and just the increase of population and the demands of new employment. Mm-hmm. So I presented the task force report to the board of directors, and I was really overwhelmed by the positive response they had. They were quite keen on the recommendations. They saw enormous importance of EPA trying to take a leadership role on moving this agenda forward. I promised the task force when I came to the meeting, to the APA conference, that I would make an affirmative request for continuing action. And the board essentially said, absolutely, we're going to move this agenda forward. We'll set up a working group. We'll continue to work with our peer professional organizations, and this is just the start. So I really couldn't have been more pleased or overwhelmed or gratified by the response of the APA Board of Directors. It was very positive.
Well, I speak on behalf of all the APA staff and our APA members, and I know we're going to be so excited to see where your work continues, and we'll be looking forward to touch base with you again and at our next National Planning Conference to see what the work has amounted in.
Yeah, hopefully I can come back and share some of our progress with you next year.
We would love that. Thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you.
I'm Emily Pasi, signing off with the American Planning Association in Seattle. Until next time.